Hello, welcome to this podcast. My name is Jo Dyson and I'm a director at First Intuition in Reading. This is the first of a series of 3 podcasts which covers the information about the new apprenticeship rules which was given to employers at our training day on the 17th of January. I hope that you find this information helpful and please do contact me if you have any questions or we can help you in any way. I've divided the lectures into 3. The first, this one, will cover an overview of the new funding rules. The second lecture will just cover the approaches taken by the main accountancy professional bodies so you can see how their new qualifications might look within the Trailblazer framework. And then the final one is just to talk a little bit more about First Intuition and how we think we will be able to work with you to help you improve your training within your organisation. First, a little bit of information about First Intuition Reading. So we've been around in Reading for about 6 years. The national partnership has been around a little longer. We're part of a growing national group of companies with Leeds and Southampton opening just in the last few months. In Reading, we are owner managed. In fact, most of the centres are owner managed. We have 5 directors. We're growing very quickly. But what's important here is our mission. The centres were opened initially by a group of directors from one of the large training companies who wanted to put students at the centre of what they do. They were fed up with the commoditisation of students. So they set up an organisation which had small class sizes, a tutor-led approach to training, and the result of that has been really good student feedback and very good pass rates, including a number of prize winners. Now, this is important because it's this mission that's really going to fit well with the new apprenticeship framework. So what are these changes that everyone's talking about? Well, it depends whether you are a large company within the levy or whether you are a small, medium-sized enterprise, which, let's face it, is about 97% of apprentices nationally. So if you're a smaller company, your apprenticeships in the future will be 90% funded by the government. It's called co-investment. And literally for every £10 that you spend on training an apprentice, the government will pay £90 to the training provider. So it really is going to reduce your apprenticeship training, or if you pay for your training commercially, it's going to reduce your training costs quite substantially. However, if you're a large firm, your funding will be very different. Firms who are within the apprenticeship levy, and you probably already know if this is the case, these are firms with a payroll bill in excess of £3 million per annum. 0.5% of the excess payroll over this 3 million threshold is collected and paid into a levy pot. Now that levy pot is held by the HMRC on your behalf. It will start to be collected from the April payroll in 2017, so not that far away now. And once it's in the pot, the government will top it up by a further 10%. So if you put £100 in, the government will add another 10. And if you use it within 24 months, it can be used to pay in its entirety for your training. So your training is effectively free if you think that the levy would need to be paid whether you used it or not. If your levy pot is quite small, maybe you're just over that 3 million threshold, then first of all, that will be used to pay for your training. And then any extra training costs will be paid 90% by the government, then 10% by you, in the same way as it would be for SMEs. As an incentive to employ those who are under 19 or those from a disadvantaged background, there's extra perks where the government will pay an additional cash sum or will pay 100% of the training costs because they recognise that young people often need a little more support and are therefore slightly more expensive for firms to employ. So hopefully I've got your attention now. So the next thing to think about is the eligibility. Now, if you've been involved in apprenticeships in the past, you'll be aware that they've been aimed at sort of those who are under 24 and ideally those who are under 19, with the funding being sort of graduated towards the younger age groups. Also, it wasn't available to people who had a prior qualification, in particular to graduates. But under the new rules, those who are eligible include graduates, existing employees, so you don't need to recruit anyone new. This could be someone within your organisation who you think would benefit from extra training. The only requirement there is that you have to show that they're learning new skills which are relevant to their role. It doesn't actually matter if they've completed a previous apprenticeship, so long as this new one is different. So you could, for instance, do a business admin apprenticeship and then retrain with an accountancy apprenticeship. There are residence criteria. These are a bit fiddly. They're linked to whether you are UK resident or EU resident, whether you have a right to work in the UK, and so on. It's probably easier to just deal with those on a case-by-case basis. And I've just listed there some of the qualifications in finance which will qualify for apprenticeship funding. So at level 3, it's really just AAT at the moment. At level 4, we have AAT, we have the ACA or ICAW with their CFAB qualification. That's the first 6 certificate papers. That's a standalone qualification or can be used to progress into the full ACA qualification. I have CIMA. Their certificate papers also qualify as level 4, and the ACCA also have a level 4 offering, which is their F1, F2, F3 paper, although they're still just waiting to get that finally approved. Also level 7, and this is the really exciting thing, the level 7 apprenticeship is still going through the process of approval, but we're expecting it to be available for September starts. Now this means that you can use your levy pot or you can use the co-investment system, which I described earlier, to fund the whole of your training, right the way through to fully qualified certified accountant, chartered accountant or management accountant. Now that is a very big change, and hopefully at this point you're thinking, wow, I can use apprenticeships in my firm. There are other changes. Trailblazer is the new name for apprenticeships. If you've heard that, that's what people are talking to. Frameworks. The old apprenticeships were delivered under a framework, but the new terminology is a standard. And the key difference with the standards is that there is now one standard that's been agreed for, say, a level 4 Trailblazer in accountancy, but that standard can be reached by any of the qualifications which I mentioned on the previous slide. The other thing I'd mention is that it's employer-led, and as a result, the new qualification is very much work-based. The actual technical qualification is just a proportion of what your apprentice will learn whilst they're under their apprenticeship program. It's more of a holistic approach to cover their whole skills and behaviours in the workplace. Now this slide is important because it covers what we call the learner journey. So when your apprentice signs up to join the scheme, how does it work? Well, it's very much a three-way relationship between us, the tuition provider, you, the employer, and your apprentice. So at the start, they will sign up to the various paperwork in order to show that they understand the program, that they know what's expected, and that they're happy with the arrangement. We then move into a phase of what we call on-program learning. Now, this is basically the period when they'll take their professional exams. Technically, professional exams aren't required, but I think from a sort of recruitment perspective, and also the apprentices will prefer to take exams. At least then at the end, they have a professional qualification as well as their apprenticeship. During this period, then, they'll attend college as a normal student would. They'll take their professional exams. They'll also maintain a training log showing the sort of work that they're undertaking in the office and how their skills are developing. This is not that different to the training log they need to claim their professional membership anyway. And they will have a mentor either from within the firm or from within the training provider. And this person will meet with them regularly, collate the information from their appraisals and help them to develop that training log. It's important you note that during their apprenticeship, you must agree to give your apprentice 20% study leave. Now that might sound quite scary, but we'll see later on what's included in that. Most courses, I was looking at my AAT level 4 course, you're probably, by the time you've taken into account college days and exam days, you're only about 8 days short of that being 20% study leave, and that can easily be made up, as we'll see in a minute. Once they've completed their professional exams and they've been on programme for a minimum of 13 months at level 4, then we can think about letting the student progress to the end point assessment. At this point, they pass through what we call the gateway. Now, at this point, again, the tuition provider and the employer and the apprentice will consider their position. We want to see what sort of evidence they've collected to show their development throughout the apprenticeship and whether we think they are ready to take that final exam. If we think they've reached a required standard, we agree to let them move through to the endpoint assessment. Now, this assessment has 3 bits to it. It has a portfolio of evidence showing the workplace skills. This is collected throughout their training, but is really added to. It's the last 6 months that's most important here. They do the synoptic exam. Now, this is a case study exam. So the AAT already have one of those, and we believe the other exam bodies are already creating one. And they also have to go through a final reflective statement or interview. Now, which depends which level of the qualification you're at and which qualification you're taking, how this will be. The interview, we believe, is to be a 60-minute interview with an external assessor. And at this point, the student will be asked to show what they've learned during their apprenticeship. The reflective statement will be a written statement, so we'll be able to help students to prepare for either the interview or the reflective statement to make sure that they're able to show their skills off to the best they can. Now this slide just shows you the 3 levels of apprenticeship that we are expecting to be able to offer from next year. So the assistance accountant, this equates to the old level 3 AAT. This has got to last a minimum of 13 months and up to 18 months. And at this point, we're looking for the AAT level 3 qualification and then a portfolio, as we discussed earlier, and an endpoint interview. So this is quite a big ask, I think, for a lot of level 3 AAT students who might be quite daunted by that 1 hour long interview, but we will help them to prepare for it. Now that qualification is already approved, so that is available for start dates from May. In practice, we will probably offer it from September, but watch this space and let us know if you have a demand for earlier starts, because we're always very happy to discuss these needs with our employers. The old level 4 qualification, and as I mentioned earlier, that includes pretty much an offering from all of the professional bodies, including on that list you'll see the ATT, the Association of Tax Technicians. This is called a professional accountant. Again, it's approved for delivery from next year. This is very similar to the level 3 in its structure, a little bit longer, and this time the endpoint assessment includes a reflective statement. And then the level 7 qualification. This is called Accountancy Taxation Professional, and this takes you all the way through the relevant qualifications. The SFA have said it should last between 18 to 48 months. And again, it's an endpoint reflective statement. We're expecting this to be finalised within the next few months, or certainly more information to be out and ready for this. But we are hoping that they will be able to offer this apprenticeship for people starting from September 17. Again, we believe, but it hasn't been confirmed, that students will be able to transfer into this apprenticeship if they've already partly qualified in their ACCA and CIMA. But again, we're waiting for clarification. Now, in addition to the technical professional qualification, that qualification is seen as evidence of the apprentice's knowledge, but they also have to show skills and behaviours. Now, these are equal weighting in the apprenticeship, if not more important, because these show that the apprentice is able to operate effectively in the workplace. Now, I've just put in there some of the examples that, of the skills and behaviours that I've taken from the level 4 standard for Trailblazers. But you can see these are the sorts of things that you're already expecting of your employees, and you probably would record these in your apprenticeship interviews with your trainees. So for instance, under skills, skill of communication and leadership, planning, team working, these are things that we value in the workplace, and in order to complete their apprenticeship, the apprentice needs to show that they've developed these skills. Now, this is something that we're very happy to help you to work through. And I see that as a 2-part role, partly in terms of helping your employees to acquire the skills so that they can use them in the workplace, and partly so that we help your employees to collate this information and to develop their portfolio so that when they do proceed through that gateway to the endpoint assessment, they've got a pile of evidence to support that. And if I just move that screen down a little bit, you can see at the bottom, it's important to show that these skills and behaviours have been developed over a period of time. So what we're looking for is a portfolio from the employee that shows how they've improved, hence the reflective statement that I've mentioned a few times already. Now, a little information about that endpoint assessment. It has to be delivered by an approved assessment organisation. Now, at the point of recording this, nobody has quite yet got their assessment organisation approved for finance and accountancy, although several are just weeks away. So we believe. This assessment organisation is external to the training provider, and you can actually choose your assessment organisation. So CIMA are hoping to have one, ACCA, ICAW, and also AAT. So actually at level 4, you could pick any one of those to be your endpoint assessment organisation. We'll have to wait and see the details of those assessments to see whether it actually matters whether you choose the one that ties to your qualification. As I said, students only proceed through the gateway to this assessment if everybody agrees that they're ready. And it includes those 3 things: the case study exam, the reflective statement or interview, and this portfolio of evidence. Now, I've just mentioned there that portfolio, it's based on the evidence in the training log, but it's not the same thing. This is a much more in-depth summary of the work that the student has done, whereas the training log is more of a summary. And as I said earlier, the portfolio is based on the last 6 months of work that the apprentice has undertaken. Now that's the end of this first podcast, where the purpose was really to give you the new framework, give you an outline of the new funding rules and the new requirements and structure of the qualification. In the next podcast, I'm going to look at the position for each of the key training providers.